Jake Sloan, better known online as Jake Neutron, is a key figure in the online animation and nerdcore music community, one of the most unique subcultures on the internet. Built entirely on independent hustle and creative collaboration, it's a space where artists transform niche fandoms into viral hits that rack up tens of millions of views. But tying your reputation to another creator means a single fight can undo your years of progress. And that is exactly what happened to Jake Neutron. This is the story of how Jake became the center of this never-ending drama. Jake started his YouTube channel in 2010 and eventually built up a community of 1.89 million subscribers in the course of 16 years. His channel primarily focused on animation and music, though he would occasionally upload some gaming videos as well. Beyond YouTube, Jake continued to build a massive following of nearly 1.2 million across his other social media platforms. By 2018, he had already established his presence on Patreon, just at the age of 18, where fans directly supported his work through paid memberships. However, Jake was not alone in his journey. During his initial years in the online animation scene, Jake crossed paths with another upcoming creator named Kitten's Knees. According to Kitten's Knees herself, the two met in a shared online space for animators back when they were both just preteens, eventually forming a close friendship that lasted for years.
And then we kind of stumbled into each other. We were kind of the only ones within the same age group, so we just kind of connected and kind of moved away from these adult spaces that we really shouldn't have been in or invited to because we were babies.
And over the years, they would work together on many projects. While Jake had been making content for years, his main breakthrough came in 2021 through his Friday Night Funkin' tracks and animations. Once those videos took off, FNF content easily became one of the main themes of his entire channel. Over the next few years, Jake stayed consistently active in the community. His previous hits racked up a lot of views, from tracks like True Kinda Love to fan favorite covers like Yal Naim New Soul and Still a Loser. But behind the viral hits and millions of views, a decade-long friendship was rotting behind the scenes. In the year 2021, Jake found himself at the center of an internet drama that completely changed how the community saw him. And it was started by none other than his longtime friend, Kitten's Knees. Now, those who have been following Kitten's Knees drama would remember that around this time, she was getting herself canceled by the community for using racial slurs and drawing Nazi art. They were working on a project together at the time, and by Kitten's own admission, Jake had initially tried to defend her to their manager when the drawings first surfaced. But then somewhere down the line, their dynamic shifted completely. Their years-long friendship ended and Jake started calling her out publicly. But instead of backing off, Kitten immediately fired back. It was in direct response to his call out that she decided to release a 106-page document, bringing forward serious accusations against Jake. At first, Kitten's Knees kept his name out of it, labeling him simply as Person A. Her goal initially wasn't to expose him, but to shift public attention away from her own controversies. She allegedly wanted to frame the allegations against herself as a revenge campaign by those people she'd cut ties with over their own problematic behavior. However, between public speculation and a warning post issued by Jake himself, she eventually came forward and confirmed his identity, and that's when the real trouble for Jake officially began. According to her, Jake and Kitten's Knees shared a mutual friend named Logan, who had been accused of SA another friend in their circle, and Logan pretty much pled guilty by admitting that he had woken up in bed with the victim's pants unzipped while she was bleeding. For some reason, when we woke up, pants were unzipped, so I'm scared we did something really not good. Like, how were her pants unzipped? I feel disgusting RN. I feel like throwing up just thinking about the possibility of touching her. The other thing was she woke up bleeding and it's not that time of the month. I feel like I'm gonna vomit. If I did touch her, I'd DK what I'd do. How am I supposed to face her after something like that? But Kitten alleged that rather than holding him accountable, Jake and his friends tried to defend Logan, making dismissive claims about the nature of the assault. To back up her claim, Kitten's Knees posted screenshots of a private conversation with Jake, where he explicitly implied that fingering didn't count as SA and went as far as to label the victim a monster. I feel gross in saying this, but all got was fingered. But she wasn't used. Logan was. Her boundaries were pushed once. His were pushed all the time. This isn't a contest of who hurt who worse, but from an outside looking in. Is the monster in this situation? Anyways, that's all the rambling I'ma do on this. I'm just emotional. Sorry I spammed your phone. I just know that if this were to somehow ever come back up, it'd be hard to fight for the truth. I don't know. As the drama spilled into the public eye, both Kitten's Knees and Jake found themselves caught in a crossfire of intense backlash. Viewers were quick to condemn Jake's defense of Logan and his harsh comments toward the victim. At the same time, many couldn't help but question Kitten's Knees' motives, given the uncanny timing of her post. To a specific section of the audience, bringing up these allegations right as her own career was falling down the drain felt suspicious. In this document of hers, Kitten had also alleged that Logan was pursuing a relationship with a 15-year-old girl while he himself was turning 19. On top of that, she claimed he would regularly make pet jokes targeted at her during group calls, the kind of behavior that made several people in their circle, including Kitten, deeply uncomfortable. Many people, including myself, witnessed this during calls where he would say things such as, "I'll use your pigtails as handlebars," to her, or make blatant P-word jokes. Kitten revealed that when she had brought this up with Jake later in private, instead of acknowledging the problematic behavior of his friend, he simply dismissed it by saying that Logan had always made jokes like that. It was me, and it made me more uncomfortable because the joke didn't like the joke either. So it seemed like a joke and very poor taste on Logan's end. And everyone just kind of went, yeah, Logan's been making those kind of jokes for years, makes me want to bop him. But typically the point of the joke is that it's ridiculous and fictional. So most you can do is go, stop joking about that, bro. Someone's gonna believe you or whatever. For many watching, it was further proof of a recurring pattern of how Jake routinely turned a blind eye to his friend's questionable behavior. But defending his friend's problematic behavior was one thing. Kitten took the allegations a step further, claiming that Jake himself was a groomer and she herself had been his victim. And as bad as those claims sounded, they were only the tip of the iceberg compared to what came next. Kitten's knees further brought another disturbing allegation to the table. According to her, Jake had previously drawn CP of both her and a friend without their permission, at a time when both of them were still underage. As expected, the public criticism was severe, and Jake knew that not speaking up any longer would be seen as a silent admission of guilt, so he finally decided to address the allegations. But when his response finally dropped, it did little to clear his name, and in some ways, only made things worse. To address all the claims against him, Jake released a counter document titled "A Statement About Kitten's Knees." He started off by claiming that Kitten's knees had been deeply toxic throughout their entire friendship. According to Jake, it was her pattern of behavior that pushed him to cut ties with her in the first place. When it came to the most severe allegations, Jake tackled them head on, but his document did not address every claim. Regarding the NSFW art, he revealed that the drawings weren't created unprompted or maliciously, they were requested directly by Kitten's knees and her friend during a callback when everyone involved was still a minor, including himself. According to Jake, the sudden callouts against him weren't about holding anyone accountable. They were a distraction. Post my last conversation with Kitten's knees, she was being called out publicly by multiple accounts about the screenshots and images that surfaced of her doing anti-Semitic art and saying the N-word in multiple contexts. In response, she began trying to discredit the callouts by stating it was being made by people who were just defending rapists or rumors, and to talk to her directly to get the real story. Perhaps the most shocking detail in Jake's document was how far Kitten went to reconnect with Jake after being blocked. Jake claimed that he had blocked her on 3 separate occasions because of how toxic her behavior was. And the last time he did, Kitten's knees bypassed him entirely and reached out through her sister directly to Jake's mother. She even suggested a group call between both of their mothers. For Jake, this was the ultimate boundary violation, proving she was willing to invade his personal life just to force a response. However, all things considered, Jake's document didn't sound very convincing. Even if you put Kitten's motives aside, it's clear that Jake had spent the vast majority of his response on revealing Kitten's toxic and manipulative behavior. He completely ignored his own defense of Logan, despite Kitten having already released the screenshots proving he did it. The only thing he did address properly was the NSFW art, and while he claimed it was requested consensually by Kitten and her friend, we have to remember that both girls were under 18 at the time, meaning legally they couldn't consent, and the fact that Jake was only 2 years older than them didn't help. The dynamic left the entire situation in a gray area, making it harder to put blame on any one party. To make matters worse, Kitten later claimed she never consented to the drawings in the first place. However, given how damaged her own reputation was from her own scandals, it was hard to take her words at face value. In the end, Jake's document may have muddied Kitten's name, but it did very little to clear his own. However, with both sides telling their stories and neither willing to back down, the situation quickly turned into an online feud. Over the next few months, a simple call-out turned into an all-out public rivalry, with both sides constantly targeting each other in their tweets. Behind the scenes, Jake's friends were desperate to clear his name. They cornered Kitten in a private group chat and pressed her hard to drop the grooming claims. "Kitten, I understand that must be stressful, but that's a lot of a text that has little to do with Jake. I accused him of being a groomer because from my perspective, I do believe that was the case. I am open to being educated on why it wasn't grooming. You are too close in age for it to be grooming. Sorry, that's not how this works. So you admit you aren't 100% sure he's a groomer, and now suddenly it's from other people telling you?" And at first, this kind of intimidation did work, as Kitten caved and took the allegation back. But her story was already all over the place, and it wasn't long before she flipped again, throwing the exact same claims right back at him. At that point, nobody watching knew what to believe anymore. At this point, Kitten might as well have come forward and admitted that she had been lying all along, but nothing would have changed. The damage to Jake's reputation was already done. In the eyes of the broader commentary space and general public, his image never truly recovered, and that is precisely exactly what happened. After nearly a year of silence, the story took another unexpected turn when Kitten abruptly reversed her stance. Kitten released a public apology, admitting to her past toxicity and taking accountability for her actions toward Jake in an X thread. To Jake, "I shouldn't have tried to weaponize your mistakes to avoid accountability for mine. I abused you for years when we were friends, and you stuck by me hoping for change. You may have made mistakes, but I used my platform to attack you for it relentlessly. Calling you a groomer was mislabeling what you had truly done, but things didn't end here. Behind the scenes, both parties had already begun to get things straight. It took them 2 years to finally reconcile. On June 6th, 2024, Jake revealed in a post that he had been in contact with Kitten since October 2023. In this post, he publicly forgave her and hoped that he would be able to depend on Kitten in the future if need be. While the two of them were finally on good terms, the internet wasn't nearly as forgiving. The moment news broke that Jake had reconnected with Kitten, public criticism flared right back up, but things only got worse from here. In addition to forgiving Kitten's knees, Jake also became her #1 defender for the months to come. In September 2025, Kitten once again found herself in the middle of a massive internet drama when animator Bertello announced the voice cast for The Amazing Digital Fight Club, a fan-made animated short of the hit show The Amazing Digital Circus. Viewers completely lost their minds over Kitten's knees landing the role of Pomni, the main character. The internet hadn't forgotten her past, the slurs, the anti-Semitic artwork, any of it, and people were furious that someone with that kind of history was chosen to lead a project. That's when Jake decided to step in to play White Knight. For months to follow, Jake kept posting tweets in her favor, and even though he never mentioned her name directly, it didn't take a genius to figure out who he was talking about. In one tweet, he said he was proud of how hard she was trying and that she deserved love. As expected, that tweet gained a lot of hatred from some of the viewers. Time and fucking place, Jake. We all know this ain't a tweet about how people can change their ways and become better people. This is about Kitten's knees, just say it. Better yet, don't say shit like this suspiciously right after a major controversy. It makes you look so bad. But Jake didn't stop. In another tweet, he argued that people aren't born racist. They just learn it along the way, and as they do, they can also unlearn it through critical thinking, self-reflection, and education. He even told his audience that if they claimed they'd never had a single racist thought, they weren't as woke as they thought they were. Naturally, this tweet got slammed. Not only did he try to defend Kitten, he implied that his whole fanbase was secretly racist. And the internet wasn't just mad that he was defending someone with a history of racism, they were especially mad that that someone was the exact same person he'd spent years calling toxic, dangerous, and manipulative. To his audience, it felt like a total betrayal, and the backlash hit him hard. But while Jake was trying to save Kitten, his own story took a turn for the worse. With the criticism getting stronger, newer fans who were completely out of the loop began asking questions. And before long, the entire timeline was once again circulating all over the internet. Realizing the controversy wasn't going to just fade away this time, Jake was finally pushed into making a statement. On May 13th, 2026, he put out his very first formal apology since the scandal initially erupted back in 2021. But instead of calming the internet, the apology only caused a new wave of outrage. He started off by acknowledging that it took him long to address the issue, and his explanation was that he needed time to consult with the victim and personally apologize to them. Implying it took 6 years to handle the situation properly was absurd, to say the least. To many people, it was obvious that he never intended to apologize in the first place and was only speaking up now because it had become unavoidable. Unsurprisingly, a section of the audience saw right through his apology and called him out for it. When explaining the screenshots, Jake framed the entire situation around being young and confused. He pointed out that he was 19 at the time, stating that after a friend was sexually assaulted, he and another friend were simply trying to figure out what had happened. Rather than taking full responsibility for what was actually said, he blamed misleading information, claiming that Google and older adults gave them conflicting and incorrect definitions on the distinction between rape and sexual assault. This specific section of the apology drew heavy criticism. For an apology that arrived 6 years late, viewers were expecting genuine accountability. So, seeing Jake shift the blame onto his age and internet misinformation just fueled the public's frustration even more. Jake then went on to admit that their conclusions were insensitive and that they shouldn't have been speculating when their friend needed support. To soften the blow further, he claimed that he had long since apologized to the victim and they were in a much safer space now. This was yet another attempt on Jake's part to silence the expected outrage from public, but it didn't work. Viewers were relieved that the victim was safe and that he'd apologized in private, but they quickly reminded him that his audience didn't owe him forgiveness just because the victim moved on. Jake finally wrapped up the statement with a formal apology to anyone who felt disturbed or unsafe reading the leaked messages. He requested the community to stop seeking out and harassing the victim, who he claimed had been receiving threats ever since the leaked chat started circulating again online. Here, Jake tried to use the victim as a buffer to shut down further criticism, pointing out that they were receiving threats ever since the screenshots resurfaced on the internet. As As defensive as that tactic was, the real outrage came from what Jake left completely unsaid. After 6 years of silence, he limited his entire apology to those leaked screenshots, completely leaving out the severe allegations surrounding the CP he had drawn, and the internet didn't hesitate to remind him of that. As predicted, Jake didn't address any comment on his post. To make matters worse, fans who tried to ask about the missing pieces were promptly blocked from his Discord server. The whole thing was a bad look, leaving the community wondering why he bothered issuing a statement if he was just going to silence anyone looking for real answers. As it turned out, they didn't have to wait very long to get their answer. Right around the time of the apology, Jake was working on Unique Geese's project, the Indigo Park, Chapter 2. For those who don't know, Indigo Park is an indie mascot horror game. It was released in 2024 by Unique Geese, and Jake had been a major part of its team ever since. Jake had designed Rambly, the raccoon, which was the deuteragonist of the game in Chapter 1. According to the Indigo Park wiki, he had also been the writer, 2D animator, 2D animation director, and a composer for Indigo Park. Indigo Park, Chapter 1 was well received, earning an overwhelmingly positive Steam rating from roughly 95% of English language reviews. So naturally, the team started preparing for Chapter 2's arrival right away. In May 2025, Unique Geese released the teaser of the long-awaited Chapter 2 of Indigo Park. It remained in development when Jake's controversy resurfaced the following spring. The new members who had recently learned about Jake's history didn't approve of him being a part of their favorite game, and before long, two community members, A and Cool Dude and Caddy, who ran the Rambly the Raccoon parody account, decided to take matters into their own hands. They began posting continuously to push Jake off the project, and as their posts gained traction, more and more people joined the wave. With fans demanding action and the backlash threatening the entire game, Unique Geese was ultimately left with no choice but to address the situation. Behind the scenes, Jake must have realized his spot on the dev team was slipping away, and as a last-ditch attempt to protect his career from this massive hit, he rushed the apology. But a half-baked statement couldn't turn the tide, and just 4 days later, on May 17, 2026, Unique Geese officially announced that Jake had been removed from Indigo Park, clarifying that he was previously unaware of Jake's past. Before Jake could even process losing Indigo Park, his career took yet another crushing hit. It turned out that Jake had also been cast as the voice actor for Fret in Don't Fret, a psychological horror game set to release in October 2026. And just a day after the Indigo Park announcement, the official Don't Fret team tweeted that Jake Neutron wouldn't be working on the project anymore. With two major projects gone in rapid succession, the message from the indie scene was loud and clear. Nobody was willing to put their reputation on the line for him anymore. At its core, Jake's story feels like a self-inflicted disaster. He can argue all he wants that he made mistakes at a young age, or that he's changed and grown into a better person, but the internet doesn't believe what it can't see. He had 6 whole years to take genuine responsibility and show real remorse. Instead, he chose to speak up only when his livelihood was directly on the line. The internet is quick to judge and even quicker to cancel, and Jake gave them every reason to do so. His apology was weak, lacked sincerity, and ultimately, he had to face the consequences. But above all, Jake's story is a perfect example of how an unhealthy friendship can destroy everything you've built. He shared a deep bond with Kitten from a young age, and neither of them seemed to let go. Their reconciliation may have ended the private feud, but it did not erase the public record, or the consequences that followed when it resurfaced. No online community cannibalizes itself more than the art community, and their latest target seems to be Giggle Gunks, the creator behind the viral House of Puzo series with millions of views. However, things went sideways fast when an animation of his got out to public containing ideas of necrophilia and Nazism. So, what on earth happened? How are people reacting to this? Is Giggle Gunks problematic, or is he a victim? Let's find out. Giggle Gunks, or Ghoul, real name unknown, is a 17-year-old Filipino creator known for his viral House of Puzo series. However, in addition to being an animator, he's also a writer, a composer, and a musician. All talents which can be seen in his videos. On the surface, his videos may seem like harmless, goofy, and low effort, brain rot content. They tend to be more going on than first meets the eye. House of Puzo is one of the most viral thing in the animation and art community in recent times. The web series created by Giggle Gunks focuses on two characters named Puzo and Bayani, a fox and a tortoise, who appear to be two regular kids at first but are then forced to deal with mind-shattering trauma. What might appear to be a friendly kids animation turns into a hard-to-describe trauma core and horror experience in the space of 10-minute episodes containing themes of self-harm, schizophrenia, sexual and physical abuse, as well as mental health disorder as a whole. There's barely 5 full episodes out yet, and the web series has already garnered millions of views, as well as a loyal fan base who identify with the struggles of the characters and are committed to decrypting the meaning behind every frame. You routinely get comments like these. I've gone through a variety of trauma and I feel like I understand this animation completely. Cleaning the blood at first is like trying lighthearted, gentle ways to process and move past things that have happened to you. Then you feel like it's working, you're having fun, and you feel peaceful and safe and happy. You spread the blood around some more to clean more, not realizing you're surrounding yourself with inescapable quantities of blood, so much you can't clean it all and you get overwhelmed. Then everything spirals again. You hurt yourself and it's back to square one. I get that feeling. I've gone through it. Puso can clean the blood, he just has to do it slowly, in little amounts. I might be projecting here, but I think the holes also represent another form of self-harm, accidentally or purposefully forcing yourself to relive your trauma because you don't know what else to do or think about. You're deluding yourself into thinking you like this until the memories seep in and you have a mental breakdown. Poor Puso. Puso clearly suffered from SA from his father during childhood. Initially, Puso appears to be doing well, cleaning the house, which also is a kind of idea for solving daily problems. When the cleaning was finished, he wasn't tired yet. Perhaps he knew what was keeping him awake. He just cleaned the house to distract himself. The part where he starts poking his eyes at the wall, I feel like he's poking at it probably to make it disappear, unlike the way Bayani did it. Or maybe that's all in my head, and in reality, he was just trying to trigger his trauma in different ways to have the feeling of solving it, distracting himself to feel like one of its daily problems. When he starts to poke the eyes and mess with it, the feeling of being distracted could very well serve as an insanity, or even make him a kind of aggressor to his traumas, making him to disturb himself instead of solving it. I don't need to explain the rest because what he did with all of that is quite explicit. But one thing I found interesting during the apple break, and it's an idea that is again part of my head and maybe, is that apples, when fresh, usually serve as a metaphor for children, and this is mainly used in topics about philia, and Puso got SA'd when he was young. So yeah, I'm really sorry if I misinterpreted something, but as also a victim of this, even though there are many other ways for this to happen and to react, I feel like it's a good explanation about it. Hope you're okay, Gunks. We all are worried for you. Comments like these are all over the episodes as fans use House of Puso to interpret similar traumas that they themselves have had to deal with. The fan base has gotten so big that there's a load of fan art and animations all over TikTok and YouTube. It's easy to forget that all of this was written, drawn, and animated by one 17-year-old. And so with the size of the fan base, he occasionally has to put out statements like these. I know you all are excited for new episodes, but I'm a one-man studio doing everything. I didn't state when the episode is coming out yet. With all kindness, some comments kind of pressure me and I don't want to rush it. It's not coming tomorrow or very soon. If missed deadlines and a rabid fan base was all he had to worry about, he'd be the least problematic creator on the platform. However, in late April 2026, a video started to go viral on TikTok and the platform formerly known as Twitter, containing very disturbing imagery. The animation was indeed made by Ghoul and portrays an odd combination of Nazi and necrophilia flags. This sent the internet into a spiral with multiple people jumping in to call him out and make fun of him. This is the lamest shit I've ever seen, couldn't even draw the swastika properly. Mind you, they took the time to animate this, edit, sketch, and color and thought nothing was wrong with it. Swear to God, these edgy 14-year-olds always use Nazi symbols, necro, and map flags and the same 5 songs. I hate when I see an art style I genuinely like be used for edgelord dangerous Danny neo-Nazi garbage. On TikTok, the reaction was slightly harsher.
Why are we surprised that the House of Puso creator is problematic? Like genuinely, do you think a mentally well person who doesn't do problematic shit would make a show that contains themes of SA, self-addiction, and overall toxic themes? I've also seen people try to excuse Giggle Gunks' actions, saying that them drawing and animating necrophile map things were vents and we are all problematic. Just accept that the show you like is created by a problematic person. This is literally ending up just like Alfred's Playhouse. I be in rants out.
The video wasn't posted by Giggle Gunks himself, it was leaked from a friend group and it was apparently vent art due to Ghoul coping with mental health issues. According to him, he struggles with autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, as well as schizoaffective disorder amongst others. Schizoaffective disorder in particular is especially serious as it can lead to vivid hallucinations and wild mood swings, which eventually could develop into manic depression amongst other things. Schizoaffective disorder, or SAD, is so rare that it's still majorly considered an unknown since the afflicted individual would need to exhibit symptoms relating to psychosis, similar to schizophrenia, or symptoms that affect your perception of reality, your thoughts and behaviors, as well as symptoms relating to mood, similar to bipolar disorder, or symptoms that affect your emotions and how you feel. As a result, there are 2 types of SAD, and they're based on what mood disorder symptoms experienced. On one hand, you have the bipolar type, where the patient experiences several days of extreme highs or mania followed by severe lows or depression. You may have an episode of increased energy with irritability followed by a period of low energy with sadness. And then on the other hand, you have the depressive type, where the patient only experiences lows or depression. Their mood is depressed and they may have a hard time completing their daily routine. This goes hand in hand with feelings of hopelessness. None of this is meant to be an excuse for the Nazi or necrophilia animation, but it is an explanation. And if all of that wasn't enough to justify a teenager making an edgy animation, Giggle Gunks addressed the situation with this statement. Recently, my personal vent art was leaked by an ex-friend of mine without permission and without full context. This art was seen only by me and my close friends. When I was 14, I was G-roomed by adults who normalized necrophilia, Nazism, and pedophilia, among many other things. Due to this intense trauma, a lot of my vent art includes symbolism involving these topics. It is an incredibly common and useful coping strategy to create vent art about situations that traumatized you. Even if they depict scary, problematic, or disturbing content, that does not mean I support them in any way. My personal issues may involve frightening topics, but representing them in my own art that is made with the purpose of helping me grow is not the same thing as agreeing with them. All the videos being spread around were meant to stay private among trusted friends who already knew this about me. As for the claim of me torturing animals, this was an occurrence that happened when I was 5 to 8 years old. I have lived with a conduct disorder my whole life, which causes me to have urges to harm, steal, or otherwise destroy things. As a young child, I was not given proper treatment for this, and as such, animals were harmed. However, this is very clearly not a thing I do anymore. The person who leaked this art is an ex-friend who I was supposedly on good terms with. This is a clear attempt at an assassination of character, and I am very disappointed to see someone so blatantly betray me. I hope this helps clear up any fears people have had surrounding me and my content. With regards to the animal torture, extra context was provided via a screenshotted text from last year where he says, "I figure it's because I was exposed to chicken fights by my Lolo and it eventually turned to a fascination of small animals, like mice, chicks, lizards, bugs. Yeah, I'm controlling those urges for now by only arming pests like cockroaches thing it's not a desire to kill more, so a desire to dissect and see their reactions before killing them. Also, I like burning stuff. I have a possible conduct disorder and lack of empathy towards small innocuous animals, so I like to torture them for science." So, this was obviously problematic behavior when he was much younger, but given the sheer amount of mental torture he's been through, as well as the G-rooming, it would be insane if the community canceled him over this. And it's worth noting that although a lot of the initial response was negative when no one had any context, after Giggle came out with his statement, there was a lot more support and voices in his favor. On Twitter, there were also a lot more support from people trying to restore context to the situation, as the initial video got over 1 million views, which obviously made him look bad. To counter that, we saw tweets like, "The animator of this was G-roomed and this was a means of venting. It was a private video which was leaked. They aren't a Nazi and they aren't a pro-shipper. This was made by a G-rooming victim. We shouldn't put this person on blast because of the edgy art style. This animation vent was leaked. They aren't a pro-shipper or a Nazi. Stop making fun of G-rooming victims." The artist was unfortunately G-roomed by adults that condone Nazism and necrophilia, and that's why they were there. It was leaked without context. It's meant to portray being upset and confused. That ideology was pushed on them. Making fun of it makes you a stupid asshole. I wish people weren't so tone deaf towards pedophilia victims. They don't treat us like people, they treat us like empty shells. Ultimately, the situation worked out so well that there were more people defending Giggle and calling out criticism of him than there were actual criticism of his behavior after a certain point. And so this whole situation was starting up a conversation much bigger than Giggle Gunks, who never had a Twitter account himself to begin with. On the one hand, it's a nice thing that this many people empathize with Giggle's situation and rightfully spread the word that he is a victim. There's also been a lot of invalid attack on people who either didn't have the context or don't understand it. Of course, the average person who doesn't know what vent art means would react negatively to seeing that video. That doesn't make them a bad person, nor is it the wrong reaction necessarily, and people have been pointing that out in response. When people see a cat dressed in a necrophilic bandana and a Kampfbinden, people are going to think it's meant to be edgy reaction bait. You can't blame people's reactions when they don't have context. At the end of the day, the video should have never been posted without context. Video gets leaked without context, someone makes a meme with the video. They are an asshole for unknowingly doing so. Either the guy who made the little meme was the friend who leaked it, or people know what they are doing. I don't know, but it seems this guy may have no idea. I think it's valid for others to feel disappointed when viewing this video made by their favorite creator, but that doesn't give others the right to shame them for it if they've shown how they changed. While I think people who would laugh at this with context is a bit evil, I wouldn't say the same for literally anyone else that saw this video without the context, because without the context, it either makes no sense or is hilarious. For real. I had no idea about the context, so when I first saw it, it just seemed like something a Nazi edgelord would make. Not everyone knows who this guy even is, so clearly, not everyone should be vilified for making fun of or reacting negatively to an animation containing swastikas and necrophilia. People are allowed to feel that way, even regardless of context. Someone else who has trauma associated with those things could randomly stumble across it and get seriously triggered, and that's why Giggle's statement explaining the whole thing was so important. Everybody copes in different ways, and regardless of your personal opinion on the matter, no one deserves to be for it, especially not Giggle Gunks. This post from a fan really does go to show how much his animations has helped other victims deal with trauma. Hi, I want to talk about the situation regarding Giggle Gunks for a little while because I am still greatly upset by how some individuals are treating him. To preface, I was subject to a G-rooming ring at a very young age. The adults in power encouraged the children within to date and engage in explicit behaviors with each other in front of everyone involved. If you refused, you were at risk of being exiled. The children involved, including me, were targeted specifically because we struggled with making friends. They took advantage of our innocent desire for inclusion and validation and manipulated it into something disgusting. I have no doubt this is similar to what Giggle experienced himself. I preface with this to establish a shared experience with Giggle. I know what it's like to be G-roomed. I know how disgustingly awful it feels. I also understand what it's like to be betrayed by someone you loved so dearly, to have one of the greatest things you regret used against you. It's absolutely devastating. The hopelessness inspired by the betrayal drove me to take my because no one had my back. I had no friends, nothing. Inevitably, I was unsuccessful. I am imperfect. I too have had mistakes I once expressed great remorse for used against me, but I have learned this. As long as I earnestly apologize and try to be the best person I can be, then I have done my best to remedy past offenses. Punishing myself has gotten me nowhere. I am sure there are many things I don't know about Giggle, but I know this for certain. If a person makes a conscious effort to acknowledge their wrongdoings and makes an active effort to do better, then they have earned my respect. I want to believe people can strive to be the best they can be. Ridiculing a person for action they've already desperately expressed regret for to no avail is counterproductive. I am not asking you to forgive Giggle. I'm asking you to hope that a person can earnestly change. This world has given you every reason imaginable to lose faith in others. Be the person who looks out for people even when they don't ask for it. Hope despite devastation. Forgive and love those who want to change for the better. That's what I think, anyway. And that right there is all that needs to be said about that. However, not everybody likes HOP. Of course, there's a section of the community who criticize the art style for being too loose and the entire thing for being ventslop that doesn't need a fanbase built around it. The fanbase point is valid because although a lot of people coping with similar things deeply tortured show like this, the quote-unquote fanbase seems to be a lot more than that these days. Recently, a video went viral of Chop, merchandise, and accessories being sold at a store. This is weird. There's no clarity on whether Giggle Gunks gave permission for this person to use their IP to sell merch, but either way, it would still be weird considering the content of the series. It's low-key kind of weird to profit off of someone's vent animation or just a person's animation in general, unless, if HOP fans want merch, I'd suggest to make it themselves. I don't want to get into the debate about whether something should have a fandom or not, but it does strike me as a tiny bit weird that there's merch for a super simple series that only deals with the trauma of sexual abuse and self-harm as a coping mechanism, which is largely a cathartic release from its author. And then there's the issue of the fanbase sexualizing and shipping the characters. Especially on TikTok, there's been lots of weird foot fetish content and weird goon posting, which is just part of the equation with any animation community at this point. Was scrolling on TikTok one time and someone commented on a House of Puso vid saying this was a foot fetish drawing. The House of Puso community on TikTok genuinely sucks ass. The only jokes I've only ever seen on there is the ice cream yummy, ice cream good, and that one Puso pic with his foot out. It's just repetitive, and that's why so many people on TikTok hate it so much. And on top of that, not sure if it's a good or a bad thing that Giggle Gunks himself has given people permission to run wild with it. He put out a community post saying, kinning, shipping, and self-shipping is okay. Even if he has no problem with stuff like that, fans are crazy and you really don't want to be encouraging them to ship your characters even if they aren't trauma-coded. And finally, there's posts like these where people seem to fetishize the self itself. That's obviously the same kind of knife that Puso uses to cut in the series. The implications here are frightening. Inevitably, with any popular IP, the fanbase and the culture around it always grows beyond the creator's control. The whole ordeal has Giggle Gunks spooked a little bit, even though he absolutely does intend to continue the series. An update on his channel read, House of Puso will be delayed as of now. The fanbase, the sudden rise of fame, all of it has been taking a toll on me for a while. The story is not over yet, but for the sake of my mental health, I'll be working on other things outside of my channel. Thank you for those who continue to enjoy the show. The art community and fan bases have a strong record of scaring away its own creators. The pressure of delivering these videos he makes entirely on his own to millions of people waiting to dissect every second of it would be crippling for anybody, let alone a teenager who's dealing with a mountain of mental health issues, as well as the fact that his embarrassing personal vent art just got leaked to the public. Frankly, if he chose to go away forever, no one would blame him, but the hope is that he sees the outpour of support he's received over the last couple of months and come to realize there's so many people who do understand what he's going through. And sure, there will always be critics of the art and of the artist, rightly or wrongly, but there's also people who will appreciate whatever he decides to put out in public as long as it's genuine, because that's what they connected with in the first place. There has always been a very special type of internet critic, the kind of person who watches cartoon shows with the emotional intensity of a war journalist investigating government corruption, the kind of reviewer who mistakes cynicism for intelligence and thinks calling everything bad writing automatically makes them the smartest person in the room. The internet was full of these people in the early 2000s. Creators like Ben T. Looney and Andrew Dobson built entire online identities around being miserable about popular media. Every show was overrated. Every fandom was annoying. Every emotional moment was cringe. And if millions of people liked something, well, clearly the audience was just too stupid to understand why it secretly sucked. And unfortunately, the internet rewarded this behavior. Because negativity is easy content, anybody can scream about plot holes for 40 minutes while pretending they've discovered the collapse of Western civilization because a cartoon character made a joke that didn't land. Being angry online is profitable. Acting smarter than everybody else is profitable. And for a long time, audiences confused bitterness with intelligence. Which brings us to Brendan Blaber, better known online as Jello Apocalypse. Now, to be fair, Jello wasn't just another random rant YouTuber screaming into a webcam with a deviant art avatar and unresolved emotional issues. He stood out because he was actually funny sometimes.
Let's begin. There are two major factions in the DeviantArt community. The first one, people that draw art so well that they make you feel like shit, and the second one, people that make you feel like shit because you are a member of their species. You, as a deviant, can submit any sort of artwork that you'd like in any medium. Just remember that no matter what you post and how good your artwork is, there will always be a piece of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic crossover artwork or something about Homestuck with 200 times as many favorites as you and twice that many views.
And even if he wasn't, his memes were definitely funny. Anyways, his fast-paced editing style, exaggerated delivery, and parody videos helped him become one of the biggest animation commentary creators on YouTube during the 2000s and 10s. But underneath all the irony and jokes, there was always this weird sense of superiority hanging over his content. A tone that said, not only is this show bad, but you're kind of stupid for liking it.
So, how should we resolve Finn losing his arm?
You know, I've been thinking, maybe we shouldn't resolve it. It's not an arc, it's part of him now. It's something he has to deal with. Something that Finn's lost and he's never getting back. It's something that'll always remind him of his father who left him and took that part of him away. Finn can't change that. Nothing can change that. He just has to live with it. He has to grow and move on. Maybe we all do.
Wait, I've got it. He meets a bee who wants to bang his arm, and then he honey-jaculates a new one.
That's it! Thank you!
Mathy, math!
So yeah, over the years, Jello developed a reputation for having aggressively dismissive takes on basically every popular animated show imaginable. Adventure Time, Gravity Falls, anime fandoms, cartoon fandoms, gaming fandoms. If people enjoyed something loudly enough, there was a decent chance Jello would eventually explain why it was actually terrible. And of course, he always did it with the confidence of a man who had personally descended from Mount Sinai, carrying the sacred tablets of screenplay structure. But the real issue wasn't even the criticism itself. It was how unbelievably defensive he became whenever people criticized him. For somebody whose entire career revolved around mocking media, creators, and fandoms, Jello seemed completely incapable of handling even mild pushback. Twitter arguments, online meltdowns, passive-aggressive posts, blocking fans, angry replies. Over time, he developed a reputation for reacting to criticism as if somebody had just insulted his bloodline. And nowhere was this more obvious than with RWBY.
Hobby is a smash hit internet show about 3D anime girls smacking each other that somehow got popular despite its initial budget of $7.
Now, criticizing RWBY is not exactly a rare activity on the internet. At this point, it's practically a competitive sport, but even among the endless crowd of YouTubers farming RWBY, outrage for views, Jello somehow managed to stand out. His criticism often crossed the line from "this writing is flawed" into what felt like genuine contempt for both the show and the people watching it. And then things somehow got even worse. Jello ended up leaking information related to upcoming RWBY content, apparently out of sheer spite, which is an incredible decision if your goal is to convince people you're a mature professional and not a Twitter user slowly being consumed by their own ego. By this point, the image people had of Jello Apocalypse was starting to change. He was no longer just a green blob making parody videos. He was becoming known as bitter, arrogant, weirdly hostile. There is actually a creator on YouTube by the name of Noah the Otter who dedicated hour-long videos to all of Jello's weird takes. And honestly, it's bizarre.
Of anime or manga, you'll know that there's a massive group of people out there that dedicate their entire life to trying to ruin things and twist it to fit their own corrupt ideology. These people
Whoa, corrupt ideology? Dang, let's hear just how corrupt this ideology is then.
Already destroyed comic books, movies, and video games, and anime and manga is their next target. So if you even
oh no! Leftists are coming for anime and manga, the woke mob, just like he said about Leon Kennedy, with the woke mob coming for Leon Kennedy. That still makes me laugh so hard.
So yeah, this is Jello in a nutshell. The kind of creator who spent years criticizing everybody else but immediately collapsed into defensive outrage whenever the internet aimed that same energy back at him. And eventually, all of that behavior would culminate in the single biggest controversy of his career, the lovely complex dub drama. A situation so messy that it dragged him out of normal YouTube discourse and into larger conversations about localization, professionalism, bad faith criticism, and the massive ego problem that infects internet media reviewers. But before we get to that disaster, we need to understand how Jello Apocalypse became this version of himself in the first place. Now, if you guys don't know who this guy is and you clicked on this video wondering what exactly he did to rub so many people the wrong way, then congratulations, you've landed in the right place. Because today, we're going to break down each of Jello Apocalypse's controversies as accurately as possible. And trust us, that is not an easy task, because Brendan Blaber's entire online presence has basically been one long list of fuck-ups. Every few years, it somehow escalates even further, like watching somebody repeatedly step on rakes, but with increasingly larger consequences each time. So yeah, sit tight. Let's start with who Brendan actually is. Brendan Blaber, better known online as Jello Apocalypse or just Jello, is a 31-year-old Irish-American YouTuber, animator, writer, and creator of the Welcome To and So This Is Basically series on YouTube. He's also the creator of Epithet Erased. He runs the YouTube channel Jello Apocalypse, which currently has over 1.8 million subscribers. He created the channel back in September 2009, although he didn't actually start uploading videos until around 2012. And honestly, his first major upload immediately stood out. We're talking about the Welcome to DeviantArt video. Now, yes, looking back at it today feels like opening a digital time capsule buried underneath 10 layers of 2012 internet culture. But for the time, the quality was genuinely shocking. The animation was smooth, the pacing was fast, the voice acting was energetic, and unlike most commentary creators back then, Jello actually animated his own content instead of staring at a microphone for 20 minutes while gameplay footage looped in the back.
Hello there, new Deviant, and welcome to DeviantArt. DeviantArt is a wonderful world full of beauty, creativity, but most of all community. Here you can browse through millions of pieces of artwork created by the DeviantArt community and dozens of pieces of artwork made by the DeviantArt community that are actually good. Being new, DeviantArt must seem like a vast, frightening place full of strangers and foreign concepts that are too complex for your simple mind to comprehend. But don't worry, with the help of this video, you too can become a master of DeviantArt. Here you can find everything. Fanfiction, poetry, original screenplays, fanfiction, comedic writing, nonfiction, fanfiction, and erotic fanfiction. And it doesn't matter if your writing isn't very good and you're sorry you don't have time to correct the misspells, because someone in the DeviantArt community will always be amazed that you were able to put words in a box. What's that, you say? You're not good at writing or art? Don't fret, you can also make stamps! Yes, stamps. Just grab your nearest Photoshop, MS Paint, or Kids Pix and type a couple of words in a box that you feel passionate about. And whammo! Your very own stamp showing off all the Sonic pairings that you support and/or make up. Finally, the world can see your personal opinions on which Professor Layton characters will make the best couples.
So yeah, that became his entire formula. Welcome to Tumblr, welcome to YouTube, welcome to Twitter. Basically, a long-running series dedicated to making fun of social media platforms and internet culture. And to be fair, people loved these videos at the time. They were fast, sarcastic, chaotic, and perfectly designed for the early internet audience that was slowly becoming addicted to irony poisoning. The production quality also helped him stand out massively. These videos took time to make because he was handling the animation and voice work himself, which is why uploads were relatively infrequent compared to most YouTubers.
And I am Jello. I am the head animator, if you want to call it that.
There's only one.
There's only one. That doesn't make it any less head than a regular animator.
He's really important.
Yes, everyone else is just like a stump on their neck, nothing else. And like a bone sticking out of it. I'm also mostly like the head writer for stuff and the editor for everything on our channel.
We mean, it's pretty clear he thought very highly of himself and did things in his own way, which is why he had a big problem when he was required to do something that didn't fit his opinion during the whole Lovely Complex debacle. But at the time, when his new video finally dropped, people watched it immediately. And honestly, this is probably the most likable Jello ever was. Back then, his content felt more observational than outright hostile. The jokes were aimed at internet behavior in general, not specific creators or fandoms. It was snarky, sure, but it still came across like somebody poking fun at online culture rather than somebody genuinely angry at it. Unfortunately, that tone would not last forever, because as Jello's audience grew, so did his ego. And over time, his content slowly evolved from making jokes about fandoms into acting like the self-appointed final authority on what good writing actually is. And once that happened, the controversies were basically inevitable. However, one of his Welcome To videos also ended up receiving a massive amount of backlash, and honestly, it was deserved. In January of 2014, Jello uploaded a video called Welcome to Tumblr, and let's just say parts of that video aged like unrefrigerated milk left on a car dashboard in the middle of July.
Hello, and welcome to Tumblr. I'm here to teach you the ins and outs of the world's most amazing interactive content sharing website. At first, Tumblr's non-stop stream of endless content might seem overwhelming, but after using this guide, you'll be tumbling like a pro. Instead of the everyday social media fare of favorites and plussies, or whatever Google Plus uses, Tumblr uses reblogs. Using reblogs, you can share something somebody else has made so everyone can see it. Reblogs allow you to create a stream of seamless content for your followers' viewing pleasure. The number of reblogs shows how important you are.
Wow!
So, you want to become popular on Tumblr, huh? Okay, slugger, just remember this. Tumblr fame is like a firework. It's quick, flashy, random, warpless, and it's over almost immediately. And it was probably set off by your neighbor. You'll be lucky if even 2 or 3 wayward sparks hit any of your other posts. There are many ways to attract attention to your blog, and you can upload tons of content. Art, writing, videos, sound clips, cosplay, blood art, photography, GIFs, and more. All media is equally good here because Tumblr is a place of equality. Whoa, wait a minute. Are you a white, straight, middle-class male with a penis who is totally comfortable having said penis? Get out.
Reblog!
Now, to be fair, early 2010s internet humor in general was already a complete disaster. Everybody was trying to out-ironic each other. Edgy jokes were everywhere, and half of YouTube thought saying offensive things loudly automatically counted as comedy. But even by those standards, some of the jokes in this video rubbed people the wrong way, especially one particular joke, the infamous vagin-enabled line.
You're not a hermaphrodite, you're vaginabled. If you want to be really popular on Tumblr, then you need to be a social outcast. What's that you say? You're straight, well off, and don't have enough shoe polish to change your race? Fear not. All you need is a good self-diagnosed mental illness. Do you worry about tests sometimes? Then you have anxiety disorder.
Yeah, people were not happy about that. A lot of the backlash came from LGBTQ communities and Tumblr users who felt the joke was openly transphobic, or at the very least playing into the kind of edgy, ha-ha, trans people weird humor that was extremely common online at the time. And considering Tumblr in 2014 was basically the internet equivalent of a nuclear reactor running at critical levels 24/7, the outrage spread fast. And in addition to the offensive comments about trans people, the video also heavily downplayed a lot of things, like mental health issues and actual struggles. Jello received a pretty significant amount of hate for the video. He also talked about it in his YumaCon 2015 panel interview, which he hosted with his sister, also known as Plaster.
And I got online, and it's unusual for me to be off Skype for 2 days straight, and there was that big reaction to it, and I got online, and you and some of our friends were like, oh, you're alive, what happened? I was like, oh, what do you mean, what happened? And then we looked at all the feedback, and I did get some death threats. That was a fun time. That's something everyone should have on their bucket list, is get a death threat. It means you stood for something, even if it's mocking a social media website, which is...
It's really important.
That's a very big deal.
And this is where we get our first glimpse into one of Brendan's favorite hobbies, writing absolutely gigantic essays. So yeah, Jello responded with a massive explanation in the comments section of the same Tumblr video talking about LGBTQ rights, his intentions, what he actually meant, why people misunderstood the joke, and basically every possible detail surrounding the situation. And no, we are not going to read this whole thing out, but if you look at that early apology closely, if you can even call it an apology, you start noticing a pattern that is going to appear constantly throughout his career. Whenever controversy hits him, Brendan almost never gives short responses. He writes novels. And trust us, as we move further into the story, you are going to see this happen a lot. Still, despite the backlash, Jello continued making Welcome to videos throughout the early 2000s. And overall, they performed pretty well depending on who you asked. Some people saw them as clever internet satire, while others thought they were overly cynical and smug even back then. But around 2016, Jello started moving into a completely different type of content, something that would become even bigger than the Welcome to series, the So This Is Basically videos. And this is where his reputation as the internet's aggressively opinionated cartoon critic really started taking shape. The format was simple. Jello would act like a sleep-deprived lunatic running entirely on caffeine and unresolved fandom trauma, and attempt to explain the plot of different cartoons, anime, games, and franchises in the most chaotic way possible.
Steven Universe is a show about the Crystal Gems, Garnet, Armrest, and Squidward. They babysit Steven Universe and go on adventures. Garnet is the best one. She is cool and lets Steven have fun. Squidward has a crush on Steven's dead mom, Mrs. Marshmallow. She's crazy. Armrest is purple. Together, they save Beach City and the rest of the Earth from evil monsters. At some point, it's revealed that all the gems are secretly evil or something, but that's only after 100 episodes of filler. You can just skip to the big twist where Garnet fights Hulk Hogan, and it turns out she's actually two lesbians in an overcoat trying to sneak into an R-rated movie. Follow Steven as he discovers his powers, such as spitting on people. Featuring Beach City's rich cast of characters, including Curly Fries Man, who attempts to murder a character on screen and everyone just seems to be cool with it. Also this watermelon. All character development is done through singing and or crying. Steven Universe keeps its mysteries as mysteries by having Steven ask no questions that any other human would ask, such as, where did this lion come from? Who is the evil space giraffe? Why is Armrest such a terrible person? Remember that time Armrest traumatized Steven by turning into his dead mom to taunt his emotionally broken father, and then made up for it by cleaning their garage? Yeah, that makes up for that. Steven Universe teaches us that even if we come to understand someone, we can still hate them.
The entire gimmick was that he would get some parts completely right while also intentionally butchering other parts for comedic effect, like somebody trying to explain a 200-hour JRPG after being awake for 3 straight days. And unlike the Welcome to videos, these took significantly less time to produce since they relied less on heavy animation, which was probably good news for Jello, considering he openly admitted he didn't exactly love making the old series anymore. So naturally, So This Is Basically quickly became the main attraction of his channel. And honestly, from a YouTube perspective, it was a genius formula. Fast pacing, loud humor, meme editing, extremely quotable lines, and most importantly, it targeted fandoms that were already huge online, which meant the video spread everywhere almost immediately. Over the years, Jello covered basically every major nerd property imaginable. Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, Overwatch, Pokemon, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, RWBY, Sonic the Hedgehog, and a ton of others. And these videos absolutely exploded in popularity. But this is also where something else started happening, because while the series was technically parody content, Jello's real opinion started bleeding through the jokes more and more over time. The sarcastic summaries slowly became less haha funny exaggeration and more Brendan explaining why your favorite show is poorly written for 8 minutes straight. And again, criticism itself was never really the issue. The problem was the tone. A lot of viewers started feeling like Jello approached media criticism with this incredibly smug energy. Like he wasn't just making fun of stories, but actively talking down to the people who enjoyed them, especially when it came to fandom heavy series like Steven Universe or RWBY, where his videos often felt less like affectionate parody and more like somebody settling. Now, before we start breaking down some of Jello's more infamous videos in detail, we should also mention that he wasn't just making parody content during this period, because despite spending half his career acting like the final boss of cinema sins, Brendan was also experimenting with a bunch of genuinely ambitious creative projects on the side. And honestly, this is part of what made his online reputation so weird, because one minute he'd be making fun of a cartoon fandom for having bad writing, and the next minute he'd suddenly lock in and produce something surprisingly creative himself. For example, back in 2016, 2016, Jello started writing a fantasy webcomic called Cornucopia. The story followed a thief named Hiccup who had paint powers and attempted to infiltrate a castle to steal an artifact, only for his plans to completely fall apart after being paired with somebody determined to catch him, which already sounds like the kind of sentence somebody writes after consuming dangerous amounts of anime and ADHD medication simultaneously. Still, the comic was actually pretty well received. It gained a dedicated fan base relatively quickly, and a lot of people genuinely liked the world building, character designs, and humor, which is important to mention because despite all the criticism surrounding Brendan, the guy clearly did have creative talent beyond just complaining about cartoons online. Unfortunately, though, in classic internet creator fashion, the comic eventually disappeared into hiatus limbo. In May 2019, Cornucopia went on hiatus, and it has basically remained trapped there ever since. At this point, nobody really knows whether it's ever going to be finished or if it's just sitting in the same graveyard as every abandoned webcomic from the 2010s. But that wasn't the only thing he was experimenting with. On December 16, 2016, Jello uploaded a video called Every Disney Movie Reviewed in 10 Words or Less. And somehow, this stupidly simple concept turned into another massively popular series. The format was exactly what it sounded like. Jello would rapidly review every movie from a studio or franchise using only 10 words or fewer, which sounds easy until you realize he was trying to summarize decades of animated films while operating at the speed of an auctioneer having a panic attack.
Every Disney film reviewed in 10 words or less. Villain is killed by random lightning bolt. Good job, protagonists.
Where's my dad?
Why, he's in the whale, of course. Wooden narrator spoils every animated segment before it happens. Oh, what a cute elephant. Let's get him drunk. We see the deer in its natural habitat. It's dead. Pretty cool documentary guest starring Goofy as a cowboy. Donald Duck flirting with live action women is weird, sorry. Fantasia with lyrics. The child acting is more offensive than the racism. 1940s Jeff Dunham talks about bear sex. Your sins are not forgiven, little toot. If kids love anything, it's legal proceedings in British courtrooms.
The series eventually expanded into Pixar, DreamWorks Animation, Studio Ghibli, Disney sequels, Scooby-Doo movies, and even the Pokemon movies. And the Pokemon one was especially chaotic because Brendan decided, for reasons known only to him and possibly several sleep demons, to sing every review to the tune of the Pokemon theme songs with the help of Caleb Hiles.
Ashes Death Scene was really bad, although it made you cry.
This naturally led to copyright problems because apparently giant media corporations become slightly irritated when you upload 20 minutes of legally questionable musical parody directly onto YouTube. The video eventually got claimed and copyright struck, although Brendan managed to bring it back through a loophole clever enough to briefly awaken the dormant YouTube lawyer hidden inside every content creator.
Doing the usual reviews in 10 words or less, we'll be doing these reviews to the theme of various Pokemon theme songs. Who's we? Well, to help me out, I brought in my buddy and professional singman, Caleb Hiles.
Hey everyone, happy to be here and privileged to be lending my voice to these reviews.
We're gonna review these movies to a variety of different Pokemon openings, starting with the original and then switching it up every few films. Okay, so it turns out the people who own Pokemon really hate it when you do that, because they hate fun, and this video got taken down with a copyright strike almost immediately. I have been trying to re-upload this for about 6 months in one form or another on YouTube, Dailymotion, Vimeo, and nothing works. So here is a little loophole I came up with. The singing reviews are no longer in this video because that would be illegal, so it's muted now. But there just so happens to be a link in the description and the comment section that leads to the accompanying audio. Now, if you were to click that link and press play right in time with the start of the reviews, then the audio would just happen to sync up. Nothing illegal about that, it's just coincidence. So I'll just give you a second to scroll on down and open that up in a second tab.
Still, after the Pokemon video underperformed and caused copyright headaches, the series eventually died off completely, but even that still wasn't everything he was doing. During the Welcome To era and before So This Is Basically fully took over his channel, Jello also made comic dub videos with friends. They would take random comics or webcomics and dub them over with exaggerated voices and chaotic humor. Some of these included If Uno Was an Anime, Sailor Moon parody comics, and even several dubbed chapters of the webcomic Cucumber Quest. But probably the most important side project Brendan ever created was something called Anime Campaign, and this is where things start becoming genuinely important to his overall story. Back in 2016, Jello began running a tabletop RPG series inspired by anime tropes, basically a Dungeons and Dragons style role-playing campaign where every arc parodied a different different anime genre. One arc was Western themed, one was sports anime themed, one was magical girl themed, and apparently the very first arc, a tournament arc, was never recorded and has been lost forever, which Brendan himself later admitted was a terrible way to start a campaign, which is honestly one of the rare moments where his criticism of writing actually looped back around into self-awareness. But the important thing here is that Anime Campaign proved something. Brendan didn't just want to criticize stories anymore, he wanted to create them, and eventually the characters, settings, and ideas from Anime Campaign would be rewritten, redesigned, and transformed into a new project. Epithet erased in 2019. So now that we've talked about Jello's content, his side projects, and the rise of his channel, it's finally time to get into the part of his career that turned him from that funny parody animation guy into one of the most divisive media critics on YouTube. Because alongside the popularity of So This Is Basically, there was also a growing amount of backlash. And honestly, a lot of it came from the absolutely unbelievable levels of media analysis brain rot that started leaking into these videos over time.
And bring a
Come
long chapter count for the biggest serialized adventure manga in history, only to find that the adventure stories aren't as good as the thriller and espionage
Wait, what?
ones. And
Come on, man, those are both good. Wow, again, I know very little about One Piece, but even I know that. Yeah, they're both good, just in different ways. You got two different kinds of stories there, my guy.
When So This Is Basically first launched, it marked a clear shift in Jello Apocalypse's content style. Unlike the earlier Welcome to videos, which focused on internet culture and websites, this new series moved its attention toward cartoons, anime, and video games, essentially shifting from internet satire to media commentary. The format was initially very short. Early episodes were only around 1 to 3 minutes long, later expanding into roughly 4 to 6 minute videos as the series evolved. Each episode followed a consistent structure, a fast, condensed overview of a specific piece of media covering basic plot points, characters, and major story beats in an intentionally chaotic, comedic way. However, Jello also has a long history of making extremely strong opinions sound like objective facts, even when those opinions are built on the most surface level interpretation imaginable. Take this tweet he made about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, for example. He said, "Please stop making JoJo video essays. I'm so tired of seeing the psychology of ex-villain and Araki's secret reasoning recommended in my sidebar. JoJo is an oil slick. It's volatile and fun to look at, but if you assume it has depth and dive into it, you'll hurt your head." So yeah, he basically demanded that people stop looking below the surface level, which is honestly infuriating to a lot of people who saw JoJo as more than just a silly meme. However, while he was getting a lot of hate, he also crossed 1 million subscribers around that time. But public opinion about Jello was in the gutter. For example, when discussing shows like Miraculous Ladybug, he would point out rushed writing decisions and production constraints, joking that 26 episodes written in 3 months and it shows.
Look out, VeggieTales. 26 episodes written in only 3 months. And it shows. Miraculous Ladybug teaches us that the amount of exposition and plot you need for a successful television show is 0. Hey guys, let's skip the exposition and put the beginning at the end. Wow, cool idea. What do we put in the middle?
While this is framed humorously, critics argue that the series often relies heavily on surface-level interpretation, focusing on pacing issues or isolated writing decisions without fully engaging with broader narrative context. This becomes a recurring criticism of So This Is Basically as a whole, that it often prioritizes punchlines over depth, and in doing so, reduces complex storytelling choices into simplified or exaggerated flaws. But the bigger issue, according to critics, isn't just simplification, it's presentation. Over time, audiences began noticing that the sarcasm in these videos wasn't always clearly separated from Jello's actual opinion. In many cases, the tone of humor and the tone of critique blended together, making it difficult to tell where parody ended and genuine criticism began. And for many viewers, the end result was that the sarcastic framing was taken as legitimate analysis. That distinction became especially important as the series grew in influence, because Jello wasn't just making jokes anymore, he was shaping how large audiences interpreted media. This is where more serious criticism of his approach begins to appear. Some viewers and commentators argue that his videos often lean toward what they describe as bad faith critique, focusing on nitpicks, exaggerated interpretations, or selectively framed moments rather than engaging with the full intent of the work. This is particularly visible in his coverage of shows like Adventure Time and Gravity Falls. In the Adventure Time video, for example, he critiques aspects like invented terminology and gross out humor, framing them as weaknesses in writing or creative decision making.
Follow their wacky adventures filled with the kind of randomness you thought was funny back when you still used the XD emoticon, featuring radical lingo, schmauzow, algebraic, slam a cow, that dude looks rough. Wow, that sounds really hip and not at all awkward and stupid. Hey there, network executive, you worried that sick lingo isn't enough to attract the kids and the stoners? Fret not, because Adventure Time's got you covered with gross out humor, featuring plenty of farts and sometimes vomit. Animated, on-screen, just visible, coming out of a mouth vomit. Not funny, never funny, always gross, stop it. Watch as the show goes from a series of episodes with no conclusions to a series of character arcs with no conclusions.
Critics of his analysis argue that this ignores the purpose of world-building language and stylistic humor within the show's tone. Similarly, character interpretations, especially around Jake and Finn, are presented in a way that some viewers felt stripped away, nuance in favor of comedic criticism. The Gravity Falls video also drew attention for its portrayal of characters like Mabel, where some argue the criticism leans heavily into highlighting her flaws without fully acknowledging her age, emotional state, or narrative context within the story.
Marvel as the writers take the best character and gradually make her the worst character by having her learn no lessons for 40 episodes. Then watch as Marbles makes Dipstick give up everything so she can have summer free time and boys over and over again. And she's just totally selfish all the time, and they bring it up in universe, and it just never gets resolved. Like, literally the devil calls her out on it, and Gravity Falls is the best Western cartoon to come out this decade, featuring wonderful writing, morals, visuals, and a story and cast that...
Yeah, she is literally, what, 12? So yeah, this pattern of focusing on flaws in isolation rather than on a holistic interpretation became one of the central points of disagreement around the series. But perhaps the most important part of this controversy is how confidently these opinions are delivered, because Jello's style doesn't present itself as "this is my interpretation." It often comes across as a definitive judgment. The tone is assertive, fast, and comedic, but also authoritative enough that audiences may interpret it as an objective truth. And that is where influence becomes a double-edged sword. Over time, viewers began repeating these takes outside of the videos themselves, sometimes treating them as settled analysis rather than one creator's perspective delivered through humor. That's what made So This Is Basically so controversial in hindsight. Not just what it said about the media it covered, but how it shaped the way audiences were taught to see that media in the first place. However, one controversy we definitely need to talk about is the RWBY video, because this was one of the first times backlash toward Jello started becoming genuinely intense outside of normal fandom arguments. And unlike the Adventure Time situation, people weren't just upset about the criticism itself, they were upset because Jello seemingly spoiled a major plot point from the show before it happened. So for those of you who haven't watched RWBY, there's a character named Penny who dies earlier in the series and is later brought back in volume 7. Around the time before that reveal officially happened, Jello uploaded his So This Is Basically RWBY video, and viewers quickly noticed something suspicious. At one point in the video, a card appears that heavily hints at Penny returning, and naturally people immediately started asking, wait, how the hell did he know that? Now, this is where things get messy. Jello later claimed that the image was randomly selected by one of the artists or editors working on the video, and that he simply thought it would age well as a joke. According to him, it wasn't some intentional malicious leak, which, okay, maybe. But then people found a comment under the video where somebody directly asked Jello how he knew about Penny's return, and Jello responded by implying that he knew because he had auditioned for the show and had information about future volumes. He said, honestly, it's because I live in Texas and I auditioned for the show. Some of the audition packets have mild spoilers in them, which immediately made the entire situation look way worse, because now people have started wondering, so was the spoiler actually accidental, or did he knowingly hint at confidential information? And to make things even more confusing, Jello later tried clarifying the timeline, saying the audition happened later, except people checked the dates and realized the comment was made roughly a year after the original video, not several years later, as some had assumed. So at this point, nobody really knows what the full truth is. Did Jello intentionally leak Penny's return out of spite because of his relationship with the fandom? Maybe. Did the editor genuinely pick the image randomly and everything else was just Brendan talking too much online afterward? Also possible, but regardless of intent, the end result was the same. A major spoiler was publicly hinted at before the show revealed it, and people were furious. And honestly, the reason so many people were willing to believe the "he did it out of spite" theory says a lot about Jello's online reputation at that point. By then, he had already built an image of being overly defensive, petty, and weirdly hostile during internet arguments, so audiences naturally assumed the worst. There were massive discussions about the situation online, especially on Twitter and Reddit, with people debating whether he broke NDA, whether it counted as a leak, and whether he acted professionally at all. But somehow, that still wasn't the end of his terrible online takes, because then we get to Infinity Train. Now, for context, Infinity Train was a beloved animated series that got absolutely demolished by corporate decision. In 2021, reruns started disappearing in favor of endless blocks of Teen Titans Go, and during the 2022 HBO Max content purge, the show was removed entirely from streaming along with several other other animated projects. Fans were devastated, not only because the show got cancelled prematurely, but because it became genuinely difficult to even watch legally afterward. A huge amount of animation history was basically wiped off streaming platforms overnight, and somehow, during all of this, Jello decided this was the perfect time to publicly dunk on the show. He made a tweet criticizing Infinity Train, literally, while fans were mourning the series getting erased from existence by Warner Brothers, which, even if you dislike the show, is just incredible levels of tone-deaf behavior. Like, read the room, man. Nobody was asking him to suddenly pretend he loved the series, but going. I think the saddest thing I have to say about Infinity Train is that I understand why Cartoon Network canceled it, and I think I would have done the same. There are some incredible stories in there, but I'm not sure that this team knows how to tell them. We mean, wow, this is low. However, he later deleted this tweet because, well, people were furious. And then there's Ratatouille. Remember when we talked about his review content in 10 words or fewer? Well, on Patreon, Jello also made extended reviews in many words style discussions, and during one of these, he went on a rant about Ratatouille that perfectly summarizes the problem people have with his mindset. We came across this tweet online where someone describes how Jello has been nothing but a disappointment. Jello Apocalypse was a huge inspiration to me. One time he said something like, I wish people would wake up and realize Ratatouille is mediocre. And I thought, wow, what a miserable mindset. From now on, I am going to heavily encourage my fans to form their own media opinions. This is a true story, by the way. He said it in an extended Patreon review of every Pixar movie, and it completely shifted my mindset on how to present my opinions. It also shifted my mindset on giving him money. So yeah, throughout his entire online presence, Jello constantly presents subjective opinions with this bizarre sense of objective authority. And over time, that attitude became exhausting even for former fans. But honestly, all of this was still just the tip of the iceberg. Because if you really want to understand how unbelievably defensive Jello can become whenever people criticize him, then we need to talk about one of the most embarrassing moments of his online career. The Twitter meltdown from April 26, 2019. And the funniest part, it started because somebody answered a harmless Twitter question asking, which Twitter did you use to like but now hate? And one person simply replied, Jello. That's it. That was all it took. And somehow this sent Brendan into an absolutely legendary defensive spiral where he started making post after post after post, defending himself, arguing with random people, explaining why the criticism was unfair, and generally behaving like somebody who had just received psychic damage from a single tweet. Now, we are not going to sit here and read every single tweet written by the mighty philosopher King Brendan Blabber Blaber, because honestly, digging through his Twitter history already feels like irreversible psychic damage, and we would rather not drag all of you down with us. So let's summarize this disaster instead. After seeing that one person said they used to like him but don't anymore, Jello launched into an absolutely massive defensive thread. And when we say massive, we mean massive. We are talking nearly 20 separate tweets of this man passionately defending both himself, so this is basically like he was in court fighting for custody of the series. The main point he kept repeating was basically, yeah, STIB kinda sucks now, but, and then came the essays. He argued that he had actually been working on other creative projects, but YouTube simply wasn't recommending them to people. According to him, audiences only paid attention to so this is basically, while the stuff he genuinely cared about kept getting ignored by the algorithm, which honestly, fair enough. That part is probably true to some extent. Once creators get boxed into a certain type of content, audiences often refuse to watch anything else, but then the thread just kept going and going and going. At one point, he explained that he started making more STIB videos again because one of his friends needed money, so he paid them for editing work through those videos, which somehow transformed the entire conversation from people don't like your criticism style anymore into actually, I'm basically just a nice person. Then he started talking about how he doesn't even make those videos primarily for views anymore, how most of his income comes from Patreon, how people misunderstand his intentions, how audiences only focus on negativity, how he's evolved creatively, how the internet reduces him to one series, and just endless paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of self-defense. And honestly, this became one of the biggest recurring problems with Jello online. The man physically cannot stop explaining himself. Now, while we are talking about Jello's many internet disasters, it would honestly be criminal not to mention the infamous vote video. A video so awkward, so painfully self-important that even Jello himself eventually deleted it. Of course, because the internet never forgets anything, re-uploads still exist everywhere. Now, we know that June the King video on Jello Apocalypse was also widely criticized for not really covering the situation as thoroughly or as carefully as the topic probably deserved. A lot of viewers felt that important context was either rushed over or left out entirely, which made the overall breakdown feel incomplete. That said, one part of the video that was handled more clearly was the vote video situation. So here's what happened. Back in November 2018, right before the US midterm elections, Jello suddenly tweeted saying, might be uploading a special video tomorrow. It's not like my usual content, but I think it's important. And oh boy, he was not kidding about it being different. The video starts off normal enough. At first, it's just Jello encouraging Americans to vote.
This is a message for my American viewers. Vote. Vote, vote, vote. Vote on Tuesday, November the 6th. Vote now if you can. Get your friends to vote. Get your family to vote. Get everyone you know to vote. Vote even if they shut down your usual polling place. Vote even if your polling place was moved unreasonably far away. Vote even if they make it hard. Vote even if you need to skip work. Those few hours of wages aren't worth your country being an unsafe place for you and your family.
Basic civic engagement stuff, nothing unusual, but then halfway through the tone shifts hard. Instead of simply encouraging participation in elections, the video suddenly turns into this dramatic, emotionally charged lecture directly criticizing the Trump administration and warning viewers about rising extremism in America.
If you voted for the current administration because you genuinely thought they would really help America, that's fine. That's what you should always do. Your vote and your voice matter. But don't be afraid to look at our country now and reconsider. There's nothing wrong with having backed the wrong horse. There is something wrong with seeing that horse running towards a cliff and refusing to get off just because it's your horse.
And look, creators are allowed to talk politics. That's not the issue here. The reason this video became infamous was because of how unbelievably melodramatic it was. Jello starts making statements comparing the political climate to horrifying real-world tragedies, saying things like, vote like a black man was lynched for protesting police violence, and vote like Jewish people are being gunned down in a synagogue like it's 1939.
Vote like a black man was hanged from a tree for protesting police violence, and police killing black men just for being black. Vote like your president is a nationalist, because he is. Vote like the term alt-right is now a household term for fascism and hate, because it is. Vote like Jewish people are being gunned down in a synagogue like it's 1939, because they are.
This immediately caused backlash because people felt he was drawing incredibly reckless comparisons and implying direct political responsibility for tragedies that were far more complicated than the video presented them to be. And this is where Jello's biggest weakness as an online commentator appears again: absolute certainty. Because instead of presenting nuanced political concerns, the video delivers everything with this overwhelming "I am morally correct, and if you disagree, you are part of the problem" energy. Combined with the dramatic music and intense delivery, the whole thing honestly felt less like a thoughtful political statement and more like somebody trying to speedrun an Oscar speech after reading Twitter for 6 hours straight. Naturally, the internet clowned on it immediately. Multiple creators mocked the video, including Turkey Tom, while people on Twitter turned certain clips into memes almost overnight. Even viewers who agreed politically with the message still thought the execution was painfully heavy-handed. And honestly, the funniest part is that Jello later admitted the video was rushed and clunky because it was made in under 48 hours before the election. Yeah, we noticed. He also defended parts of the rhetoric afterward, arguing that he believed there was a connection between extremist political rhetoric and growing fear among minority groups in America, which, fair enough, that's his opinion. Now, at this point in the internet rabbit hole, things start shifting from documented controversies into the much messier territory of online speculation, the kind of claims that exist more in fandom rumor circles than in anything properly confirmed. One of the more frequently brought up examples involves an alleged alternate account that some users online have linked to Jello Apocalypse, supposedly under the name Pepper Spot Sunshine, which is, well, a fart fetish account. Now, to be very clear, there is no solid, verified evidence that this account actually belongs to him. What exists instead is a mix of screenshots, old comments, and internet threads where users try to connect dots that were never officially confirmed in the first place. At most, what we're left with is a collection of circumstantial claims and online assumptions, amplified by creators and commentary videos that revisit the topic through an investigative lens. However, we can tell you that the creator called Toastify made a video investigating this situation, and according to this video and tweet we found online, it all goes back to a comment that Jello made on a video of a girl where someone was asking about he girl's name, and Jello replied with the name. We mean the comment that Jello allegedly replied to is so nasty that we don't even know if it should be read out, but this is the tweet we are talking about. A lot of people also point out that the art style is also heavily similar to Jello. And oh well, he also drew art for Pizza Game, which, if you don't know, is a mind-numbing dating game. Now, all of that being said, we're not even at the biggest disaster of Jello's entire career, the controversy surrounding the Lovely Complex dub. So, for those who don't know, this wasn't just a case of people didn't like a video or some tweets got taken out of context. This was a full-blown industry-level controversy that started with a small localization project and eventually spiraled into public backlash, professional distancing, and a wider debate about how far adaptation work should go before it stops being adaptation at all. To understand it properly, you first have to understand the context. Lovely Complex is a well-known shoujo romantic comedy manga from the early 2000s, later adapted into an anime in 2007 and followed by several other adaptations. Yes, it is that popular. Now, a decade later, in October 2023, the company announced an English dub to to be in the works at Sound Cadence Studios, set to be released in a 2024 Blu-ray box set. This was a largely collaborative setup involving favors, low-budget scheduling, and a lot of informal creative work rather than a traditional studio pipeline. Jello Apocalypse was brought into this project in a freelance capacity, contributing to script adaptation work alongside other collaborators. From the outside, the production already had unusual conditions, limited funding, tight scheduling, and a heavy reliance on goodwill between contributors. Now, that being said, at the beginning, most people didn't even know Jello was involved in the project at all. His role wasn't widely publicized, and for a while, there was no direct link between him and the dub in the public eye. That changed when the two companies involved in the production, Discotheque Media and Sound Cadence Studios, released a statement denouncing a collaborator for unprofessional conduct. The post didn't name anyone directly, which initially left the situation vague and open to speculation. However, it didn't stay ambiguous for long. Discotheque had actually publicly shared production credits listing the staff involved in the dub. Among those credits, Brendan Blaber, Jello Apocalypse, appeared under roles of ADR scriptwriter and lyric adaptation. Once that information was out in the open, it didn't take long for viewers to piece together who the statement was referring to, and the situation escalated from vague industry news into a full public controversy almost overnight. However, the controversy began only after comments made by Jello regarding the original material became public. In his later Patreon write-up, he openly shared his frustrations with aspects of the source material and discussed the creative decisions made during localization. So yeah, the situation probably wouldn't have escalated into something this large, or left him with the level of backlash he has now, if Jello hadn't chosen to go on his Patreon and openly break down, justify, and in some cases boast about his involvement in the entire project. On top of that, he made the decision to set this one particularly long Patreon post to public, meaning anyone could read it without needing a subscription. That post quickly spread beyond his usual audience and became the central piece people pointed to when discussing the controversy. That is, before it was deleted. The post was titled, "Marissa and I write an anime dub," and in the description, he wrote, "This post is free because I wanted to talk about our work on this show, but I obviously don't want to paywall it as I don't own it." In it, he laid out the full scope of the project, his creative contributions, and his personal opinions about both the process and the original material. What stood out wasn't just the content itself, but the tone. It mixed behind the scenes insight with blunt criticism and strong personal framing of what he thought worked and what didn't. Once that was made public, it essentially reframed the entire situation. What had started as an internal industry dispute or vague statement about unprofessional conduct suddenly became a widely circulated first-hand account, one that people could dissect, quote, and interpret in multiple ways. And the way people interpreted it the most was, wait for it, artistic vandalism. Now, before we talk about the impact of this post, it's worth looking at some of the things Jello actually said about the project itself. For context, Lovely Complex is a story about a tall girl and a short boy who fall in love but struggle to act on their feelings because of their height difference. In his write-up, however, he downplayed that central premise, suggesting it didn't reflect real insecurity in a meaningful way and drawing comparisons to modern takes like Netflix's Tall Girl. In other parts of the post, he was far more blunt about his overall opinion of the series. He described Lovely Complex in strongly negative terms, arguing that he felt the writing and character dynamics were flawed and that the story didn't hold up well in his view. He also went into detail about his frustrations with certain narrative choices, pacing issues, and character behaviors, framing much of the series as something he actively disliked working with. He said, and quote, "I hated Lovely Complex." He further discussed production circumstances, including how the localization team operated under tight constraints and how parts of the project were handled in a very informal, favor-based way due to limited resources and staffing changes during production. And to make things even worse in the eyes of many readers, he also openly pointed out the difference in professional standing between him and his collaborators. In the post, he emphasized that since Marissa Lenti was directly associated with the production companies, she was effectively limited in what she could publicly say about the situation. In contrast, he framed himself as a freelancer brought in on a contract basis, arguing that this gave him more freedom to speak openly and express his personal opinions about the project. We mean, just wow. However, after the post circulated, the reaction from audiences was far from neutral. Instead of seeing it as a behind-the-scenes reflection on adaptation work, many people interpreted it as unprofessional criticism of a property he had helped localize. Critics argued that his tone came across as dismissive and overly harsh, especially toward the original creator's work, while others went further and labeled his opinions as disrespectful and unbalanced for someone directly involved in the adaptation process. We mean, he called Risa a psychopath and Otani and BU's victim. However, from that point onward, discussion around the dub stopped being just about translation choices and started focusing heavily on professionalism, tone, and whether public commentary like that crosses a line when you're part of the creative team. The backlash wasn't just about opinion, it was about tone and timing. In localization work, even critical interpretation is usually expected to remain internal or carefully framed. Because Jello publicly expressed strong creative dissatisfaction alongside his involvement in rewriting elements of the script, it blurred the line between adaptation and critique. And we are honestly putting it lightly, because Jello, in the end, was a complete unprofessional asshole. Supporters of the project also pointed out that many changes were standard localization choices, adjusting humor, smoothing dialogue, and modernizing references. The situation escalated further when an online discussion dissected specific dialogue changes and added jokes. Some viewers felt these choices improved clarity or comedic timing, while others believed they altered the original tone of the series too aggressively. Once that debate started, it quickly moved beyond the dub itself and into broader arguments about localization philosophy. By the time official statements were released by the companies involved, the discussion had already grown into something larger than a single project. But Jello maintained that he made the dub better and that there was no vandalism. But even after all of this, it still wasn't enough for Jello. It seemed like he continued to stir controversy, fully aware of how people already perceived him. Because of that, he decided to push things even further, and this time the reaction was noticeably stronger. This brings us to his video on One Piece, a series with an extremely large and highly protective fanbase, which he was clearly aware of. When he uploaded his breakdown of the series, it quickly became clear to many viewers that he either didn't fully understand the material or was deliberately exaggerating his criticisms.
OP's is the story of Loosey Goosey. He plays things fast and loose, but he got too loose and now he's all wiggly. He's made of rubber. How did that happen?
Yo, the government has been lying to you. Our true history is written on magic Legos. The gum fruit isn't real. There are weasels on the moon. Cast away your shackles, my brothers, and rise! Rise!
Now, compared to his earlier STIB videos, this one stood out. Instead of feeling like light comedic commentary, many viewers felt the tone was significantly harsher. A number of commenters pointed out that the video didn't feel like playful ribbing anymore. We mean, it was even worse than Adventure Time or Gravity Falls. This one was just mean-spirited. Jello crossed many characters, saying that the show would be better off without them.
All of these guys are absolutely essential. How many of them could you possibly cut while telling the same story?
Whoa!
Oh, that's at least 5 of them. I'm glad we wasted pages on these dudes instead of seeing the Straw Hats actually have any kind of dynamic with each other.
He made fun of the anime for having too many chapters and oversimplifying every arc.
Come aboard and bring a long chapter count for the biggest serialized adventure manga in history, only to find that the adventure stories aren't as good as the thriller and espionage ones, and the author should probably just be writing that. Revel in excitement and watch as Lucy has to punch the bad man in order to stop the natural disaster from crashing down and destroying an island that's shaped like a circle.
One viewer summed it up by saying, "This video felt like it crossed the line from joking criticism into something more mean-spirited. It's well animated and well produced, but the tone just feels unnecessarily harsh compared to the usual STIB style." Another commented, "It almost feels like there's some kind of grudge against One Piece. I'm not sure if that was intentional, but it definitely changes the vibe from the earlier videos." In the end, whether you view it as harsh criticism, misunderstood intent, or just another case of internet discourse spiraling out of control, the situation around Jello and his work shows how quickly things can escalate once audience perception shifts. What started off as commentary, creative writing, and satirical breakdowns slowly turned into a long chain of controversies, misunderstandings, and community backlash. With every new project or post, the conversation seemed to grow bigger, and the focus gradually moved away from the content itself and more toward the person behind it. At a certain point, it becomes less about individual videos or specific takes and more about how everything connects together in the public eye. And in Jello's case, it was just bad. The isolated incidents and the bigger picture. On this note, we would like to end today's video. We tried our best to cover the major aspects of Jello's careers and controversies. Feel free to comment down below and let us know, what do you think about this?